This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, May 20th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. We begin in Southern Africa, where on Wednesday, Malawi destroyed more than 19,000 doses of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines that expired 18 days after arriving. That was despite assurances from the African Union and the World Health Organization that the vaccines were safe until mid-July. A batch of 102,000 vaccines arrived on March 26 under an initiative by the AU and WHO, and they expired on April 13, leaving less than 3 weeks for them to be used. Malawi managed to deploy about 80% of them by that time. John Kengasong, director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, part of the AU, told a news conference last month that the shots could be used until July 13th, based on a further analysis conducted by manufacturers of the Serum Institute of India. He and the WHO also urged African countries not to waste vaccines donated to them. However, the Malawian government said it would not give expired vaccines to its citizens. The Malawian Health Minister, Kumbize Kadodo Chimponda, said it is against government policy to issue expired drugs to citizens. A CDC Africa official declined to comment. Still, in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe has detected the first cases of the new coronavirus variant that emerged in India, according to Vice President Constantino Chiwenga. He said that all travelers from the Asian nation would be required to undergo mandatory quarantine. Chiwenga, who also doubles up as Zimbabwe's health minister, said in a statement the cases had been detected among a group of people in the central town of Kwekwe after a student returned from India on April 29. A summit on financing Africa has concluded that wealthier nations should be persuaded to reallocate $100 billion in IMF reserves to African states. Matthew Larotonda of Reuters has more.
African and European leaders have agreed to push wealthier countries to reallocate $100 billion in International Monetary Fund reserves to African states, planned for October. That was the outcome of a summit held in Paris on Tuesday. A communiqué said a substantial financial package is needed so African countries are not left behind in an economic recovery from the global health crisis. Key to the talks were what's called special drawing rights, or SDRs, from the IMF reserves, and reallocating them from richer nations to the continent. French President Emmanuel Macron said France and several European countries were aboard.
Our work in the coming weeks will be to convince others to make the same effort as France, starting, of course, with the United States of America.
The summit's part of Macron's effort to recast France's engagement in Africa, where it was once a colonial power. It also comes at a time when the continent faces a near $300 billion deficit by the end of 2023. The African Development Bank has forecast that 39 million people could fall into poverty this year. Senegal's President Macky Sall welcomed the plans, describing it as a change of paradigm.
Africa is used to seeing projects and programs being conceived for it and imposed on it. Today we're building what we need for us, together. I think that's what's new, and that's why there is hope.
The International Monetary Fund's chief, Kristalina Georgieva, said Africa's economic output would increase by only 3.2% in 2021, compared with 6% for the rest of the world.
Revenues are down, expenditures are up, and debt is high.
Georgieva pledged to come up with a new allocation proposal by August.
That report by Matthew Larotonda of Reuters. Hundreds of migrants braved tightened security to try to force their way into Ceuta on Wednesday, as Spain pressed on with expulsions of thousands who had swum or climbed into its North African enclave over the past 2 days. Around two-thirds of the roughly 8,000 migrants who made it to the enclave have been expelled, according to the Interior Ministry in Madrid. Many who were sent back said they were determined to head for Ceuta again. As dense afternoon fog descended, hundreds of young men made a fresh attempt to approach the roughly 6-meter-high metal border fence before being repelled by Moroccan police. Others entered the water and began swimming towards Ceuta's beach a few hundred meters away. Guillaume Soro, a former prime minister and rebel leader in Ivory Coast, went on trial in absentia on Wednesday on charges he plotted a coup against President Alassane Ouattara. The trial got off to a fiery start, with Soro's defense insisting on more time to examine alleged evidence against him and the 19 others accused in the case. As a result, the second day of the trial was postponed to May 26, according to Diallo Suleiman, who is also on his legal team. His lawyers have condemned the case as politically motivated and say there is no evidence Soro was guilty of conspiracy. Soro, who is in exile in Europe, has already been convicted of embezzlement and was sentenced last year to 20 years in prison. Nigeria's Chamber of Commerce has warned that increasing violence and abductions are turning off investors and damaging the economy. Officials say unless security is improved, the economy will not recover from the coronavirus pandemic. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
Rosemary Akwachike started her coconut processing company as a side job 6 years ago. But as awareness about the health benefits of coconut oil and other coconut derivatives grew, so did her business. So she decided to give it more attention and approach investors for expansion. But Nigeria's insecurity affected her ability to source her major raw material, coconut. Now, she's struggling to stay afloat.
It has actually impacted negatively. Like I said previously, I've tried to maintain prices, but I don't know how much longer I can do that with the, incessant, the continuous increase, really.
Rosemary must increase her prices to remain in operation or gather her own raw materials to reduce overhead costs. But even that, she says, is too dangerous these days.
I'm actually trying to set up a coconut plantation in my village, in my local government, but then you don't want to be on the road always.
Nigeria is seeing high levels of crime and insecurity across the country, including militant attacks in the northeast, clashes between communities, and large-scale kidnappings for ransom. The country's Chamber of Commerce blames the situation for a recent downturn in foreign investment. Public finance analyst Isaac Botti says the situation is affecting Nigeria's economy.
The Nigeria economy has been contrasting significantly. As of 2019, the economy contrasted by 8-point-something%. As we are talking, we are at negative, minus 2-point-something%. And this is to tell you that foreign investment is dwindling in the face of insecurity.
Foreign investors account for about 60% of Nigeria's overall investments. Between 2018 and today, investors pulled out about $4.5 billion from Nigeria's stock market, according to the Nigerian Exchange Limited. But Ken Ife, a chief economic strategist at West African bloc ECOWAS, says the COVID-19 pandemic is also to blame for the outflow.
Our capital importation last year in first quarter was just over $8 billion. But suddenly it crashed in the second quarter to $1.5 billion, 1.4 in the third quarter, and 1.5 in the first. So in aggregate terms, 2020, we had only $9.6 billion capital importation compared to double that the previous year.
Experts say unless the security situation is addressed, businesses and Nigeria's economy will continue to suffer consequences. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Hosts Patriots of Rwanda earned a slot into the next round of the Basketball Africa League with their second win of the tournament, a 78-72 victory over GNBC of Madagascar in a closely fought game Wednesday at the Kigali Arena after losing their opening game Monday. Mozambique's Ferroviario de Maputo revived their chances in the Basketball Africa League with an 88-74 win over Asduanis of Senegal Wednesday at the Kigali Stadium in Rwanda. My colleague Jackson Vunganyi has the highlights.
GBNC got off to a fast start with a basket by Kiade Mijoro Razanama Henina and took a 14-7 lead halfway into the first quarter. But a low pass from Branson Kostner to Prince Ibe brought the Patriots close. A double attempt by Bush Wamokota of Patriots tied the game at 16 apiece. GNBC went ahead again with a basket by Alpha Jean Arnold Sorondrani off a pass from Kiade Mijoro Razanama Henina. Razanama Henina was in action again with a basket and a free throw. He followed that with a breakaway layup. Patriots came back and took a lead towards the end of the first half with a basket by Astrid Mugabe. GBNC responded with a three-pointer from Razanama Henina. The Madagascar team went ahead again with a three-pointer from Sorondrani. Patriots' Dieudonné Ndizeye blocked a layup attempt by Francis Mori. And Steve Hagubinwari scored after a failed attempt by Bush Wamkota. Hagubinwari scored again off his own missed free throw, but Zico Lucandro still kept GNBC ahead with the layup. Patriots stayed close with a basket from Kenneth Gasana, who set up Wamkota for a dunk a few minutes later, as hosts Patriots pulled away with a final score of 78-72. Ferroviario went ahead from a tip-off, but the Senegalese quickly caught up with a three-pointer by Sheikh Bamba Diallo and a dunk by Hassan Ahmed El Sayed. AS Douane Mamadou Lamine Diop scored on a bounce pass off a block by Ferroviario's Adjehi Baru. Diop followed with a three-pointer, keeping the score a close 42-41. But Maputo's Mike Kabongo answered with his own three. A jumper by Diop kept AS Douane ahead and increased his team's lead with a dunk off a lob pass from Christopher Jarrod Coakley. But Ferroviario stayed close with a three-pointer by Alvaro Massa, who was in action a few minutes later with a layup, followed by a free throw. A corner three by Massa saw Ferroviario pulling away early in the fourth quarter. The Marcus Holland added another three to keep Maputo ahead. Alvaro Massa, who finished the game with 26 points, 9 rebounds and 4 assists, put the game away from AS Douane's reach with another three, giving the Maputo team its first win in the tournament. Mamadou Faye tallied 21 points, 4 rebounds and 5 assists for AS Douane in the losing effort.
Stay with us for all the highlights throughout the tournament here on Africa 54. You can hear the games live on these local VOA FM stations or at voanews.com. Let us know what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. Our address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Kenyan man walks thousands of miles for elephants. We'll be right back.
All this week on Africa 54, we are partnering with the BAL to bring you the best of African basketball. Don't miss it. Yeah.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Kenyan judge Martha Koome has defended dissidents and helped to write women's rights into the constitution. Now Parliament has confirmed her to be the first female Chief Justice in a country where the role is particularly sensitive. President Uhuru Kenyatta will swear her into office in coming days after Parliament voted to approve her nomination on Wednesday. That makes her likely to be in place during next year's elections, when Kenyatta must step down after 2 terms in office. He has walked 17,456 kilometers in 7 African countries, the US and the United Kingdom, to save elephants from poachers. Kenyan Jim Justice Nyamu's mantra is Ivory belongs to elephants. He says the only thing standing between him and his work for now is COVID-19. I spoke to Jim via Skype and asked him why the cause to save the elephants is so dear to him.
I chose to conserve elephants, or just to give elephants high visibility, because elephants are keystone species. That means if you conserve elephants, you conserve other species they are in. We also call them the point for conservation. That means they need big space for conservation. They need big area for feeding, eating 300 kilograms of food.
What's the population of elephants in Kenya today compared to, say, 10 years ago?
At the moment in Kenya, we have 25 and 30,000 elephants. And most of these elephants are actually in savanna, and also half of it would be in forested areas. We have seen the forested population actually declining. Some forests which had 270,000, at the moment you're talking of 50 individual elephants.
Jim, what has fueled the demand for ivory?
What happened in 2007, we saw some 4 countries in Africa. This is South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. They declined their population of elephants. They changed their population from the Apedex 1 to 2. That means you can now sell the stockpile. And I think this has really increased poaching in African countries, particularly the East African countries, where we are second from South Africa in terms of the elephant population. So the demand has been driven by actually the opening of the sale of ivory in some countries that would call them consumer countries.
For the last 40 years or so, we've lost about 3 million elephants.
And could you name those consumer countries?
The Ivory Trade Information System shows Chinese or China, UK, and America, and some few countries like Netherlands are actually basically the consumers. And also we have others that are transit country. This is Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand are also involved in the soul business.
But when you look at Kenya, there must be those who are also helping, those consumers. They are the ones doing the groundwork and killing elephants. Have you had anybody prosecuted for these crimes?
We have a stiff penalties, life imprisonment, but we've not had anyone in since 2014. Yet so many people have been arrested. The case actually gets lost in between the magistrate and the judges. So we have stiffer penalties, but it's how it's being handled in the court.
Outside of the borders of Kenya, Jim, how far have you taken the fight to protect the elephants?
I have worked in 7 countries in Africa.
Father, we want to thank you for bringing us together this morning. Thank you that God, you've given Jim a vision, and we believe in what he is doing.
This is Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Botswana, and Uganda. And then I worked in 10 states in the United States, from Massachusetts to Washington, D.C., and also 6 states in UK, from Kensington all the way to Bristol.
How have your efforts been recognized locally and internationally?
Her Excellency, the First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta, who is the First Lady of Kenya, she flagged me off from Kenya to East Africa. And her financial support that came was to hire a vehicle for 15 days, which was, to me, was a good start to support my campaign. But other countries recognize me, like Zimbabwe, where they give me a recognition. Also in the US, after my interview, again, with Good Morning America, I was able to convince the US Fish and Wildlife to destroy the tons of ivory. And they invited me in Colorado, Denver. When I did my work in the UK, I was given a chance as a guest honor speaker at the House of Lords during the debate to end the trade of ivory back home.
Many people now are talking about elephants. If I didn't plan and I didn't execute this work, they would have not known elephants. So this is one thing I will take home, that now I have made sure that someone somewhere in those 5 countries, they are speaking about elephants.
The GDP of Kenya, 14% is supported by tourism. That means it's going to affect the entire GDP of this country. We've seen what happened in some areas, like Mombasa region, some of those areas, Malindi, Kilifi, when poaching is pronounced there, we receive the decline of tourists. So the attraction of tourists in this country depend on the harmony and when there is peaceful coexistence, and when there are no cases of poaching.
That was Jim Justice Nyamo, Executive Director of Elephant Neighbors Center, speaking to me from Amboseli National Park in Kajiado, Kenya. The Biden administration has been considering changes to sweeping travel restrictions that bar much of the world's population from coming to the United States. However, it has reached no decisions, according to the government and industry officials. European Union countries agreed on Wednesday to ease COVID-19 travel restrictions on non-EU visitors ahead of the summer tourist season. Ambassadors from the 27 EU countries approved a European Commission proposal from May 3rd to loosen the criteria to determine safe countries and to let in fully vaccinated tourists from elsewhere. In the US, White House spokesman said there were no changes in travel restrictions planned at the moment. Since early 2020, the United States has barred nearly all non-US citizens who have recently been in the UK and much of Europe, as well as China, Iran, and Brazil. This year, Washington added South Africa and India to the list. May is Mental Health Awareness Month in the US. During this last year, filled with lockdowns, safety measures, and precautions, people's lifestyles have changed. And it has all taken a toll on mental health. Across the globe, people have noticed changes in their behaviors and thoughts. Isha Sarai and Beryl Balderas met with several Americans roughly a year into the pandemic to discuss some of these changes and how they are coping in this segment of Alone Together, produced by Jacqueline D. Phillips and Isha Sarai. We explore the toll the pandemic has taken on mental health.
Social life is crazy because I want to see my friends. It's really hard to have friends right now. We have to make sure we FaceTime each other or just give a text hey, how have you been? Because we haven't talked in 2 months.
Her life has shrunk so greatly, just basically to her bedroom in the house.
I love books, but I can't sit down and just stay in one spot and just read, So I think there has been trouble, and I've had trouble sleeping, and sometimes I still have trouble sleeping. I tend to be a worrier by nature anyway, so.
The ability to focus has certainly been a challenge.
The biggest thing that it's done is it's made me realize how much social pressure seeing people in person is a really good thing for our health. I've noticed that if I'm not seeing people for 5 days in a row, I am forcing myself to shower, I'm forcing myself to brush my teeth, I am oftentimes forcing myself to change clothes.
Mental health is your ability to manage your emotional, physical, cognitive state of mind. It is being aware of your thoughts, being aware of your emotions, and being aware of your behaviors and how those all intertwine. And your ability to manage that and recognize that sometimes they do go out of whack, sometimes they are more severe than others depending upon factors.
So talking through a therapist really helps because they're kind of removed from the situation. They aren't your family, they aren't your friend. And sometimes it just helps to vent and just say, this really sucks, and I'm going to talk about it for an hour.
The biggest psychological change that I've noticed in myself since the beginning of the pandemic has been loneliness. And I am someone who is hyper social, and it's been really hard not seeing people, not being able to interact with people, except through these, electronic devices in our pockets.
Now everybody views everybody else as a source of danger, or something could happen if we get too close. And also the wearing of the mask. You can't read people's emotions, how they feel, or sometimes even recognize the people, because you don't have all those cues.
I was considered essential, and so many people were not, and that was a huge blessing for me, and I used that blessing to help other people through a really hard time, because so many other people were suffering and were, on the verge of losing their homes and their cars.
Things that I've learned since the pandemic was that addiction behaviors as a disease really doesn't go away, even though I've been in remission as soon as I was isolated in my apartment. The way my brain went, here I am 13 years in recovery, and all of a sudden I'm not accountable except to myself, and people who have less recovery or even less accountable going, there's nobody going to know them.
Over the course of time, I learned that there's a rise of domestic violence, especially when people are stuck at home and they're stuck at home with their abusers and they don't necessarily have those outlets and resources. So I created a blog. It's called Ogadan Na Isti, and it's Cherokee for We Are Ready. And it's to empower Indigenous voices to kind of share story about what it was like surviving domestic violence, just so people have a community and place to share.
The one thing that has grown the most with me is I've grown farther more into my faith. It has definitely allowed me to really dive in and get closer to God, and I'm very thankful for that. And it's hard because you have such a terrible time in the world, but I just truly believe that in all bad things comes good, and you just have to be willing to look for it because it's right there.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, we thank you for watching.